Welcome to InCast. Enjoy Health Education's podcast for dedicated healthcare professionals, educators, and administrators who are passionate about making a difference, encouraging healthy outcomes, and finding innovative ways to engage and empower new families and staff. Here's your host, Debbie Young. She's been a childbirth educator and doula for almost 30 years and came to Enjoy based on her love for educating families.
Thanks for joining us today. Today we'll be talking about the impact of media on baby and toddlers' health and development. Joining us is Dr. Hill, the chair of the American Academy of Pediatrics Council on Communication and Media. He's also the author of Dad to Dad, Parenting Like a Pro, and an adjunct assistant professor of pediatrics at the University of North Carolina School of Medicine. He's a member of Enjoy's review board also. He lives in Wilmington, North Carolina with his wife, 3 children, and 2 stepchildren. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Hill.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is, I think, a very important topic because everyone is about FaceTime, screen time, video games, and all of that now. And it's hard for a parent to decide when to start that and what impact it does have on our children. So I really appreciate you being with us today.
You bet.
Yeah. So can we talk just at the beginning a little bit about the statistics on the time spent consuming media for, say, the newborn to the 3-year-old?
Absolutely. You know, nobody's really broken it down by newborn to 3, but we do have a lot of information about younger children. One of the best studies on this came out in pediatrics in 2015 is looking at exposure and use of mobile media devices by young children. That demonstrated that almost all children, 96.6%, had used mobile devices, and most started using them before the age of 12 months. So you're talking about infants. These are people who chew on whatever you put in their hands.
Wow.
And yet,
that's amazing.
You know, they're using mobile devices. By age 4, half of children in the study had their own television, and 3/4 had their own mobile device. That's 75% with their own tablet or phone at age 4. Now, if you want to compare to when I was a child, and it's getting to be a bit far back there, but in 1971, when I was 3, the average age at which children started to watch television was 4, right? So I wasn't even at the average for beginning to watch any kind of screen. So there's no question that we're in a world that is much different and where screen media are completely ubiquitous, even for our very youngest children.
So how they're consuming it sounds like there's a broad range of ways that they're looking at some type of device there. Wow.
Exactly. There's a ton of ways. If you look at children from 0 to 8 years of age, then in 2013, 63% had a smartphone, and I think it went up. We actually have a new study that is more recent than that. So looking at 2017, 42% of children aged 0 to 8 spent time with TV. 12% were using DVDs or videotapes because nobody has those anymore. 7% were using computers, but 35% were using mobile devices. This compared to 4% of kids in 2011. So just over a 6-year period, you have this massive increase in the number of young children using mobile devices in order to connect with the internet.
Wow. That's amazing and I think a little bit scary. I don't have grandchildren yet, but my children, if they listen to this podcast, will be mad because I didn't even let them have a cell phone until they were 16 and driving. So, oh well, that's all right. Let's talk about developmental milestones as it relates to this viewing of media. Can you discuss the concepts of, I've heard the term video deficit in infants?
Yeah, right. So the idea is at every age, kids have different ways that they learn ideally. And during infancy and young childhood, especially before age 2, they really learn by interacting with adults in their environment, especially their caretakers. Usually that's a parent, sometimes it's a grandparent, sometimes an older sibling, sometimes, an educator. But regardless, children are wired to learn through interactions with their physical environment and with the other humans who are around them. Now, we're all used to looking at screens and understanding what we see. We know what we're looking at. We understand the language of screens. We understand how it tells a story. But this is not a skill that we're born with. I think if you, what was the movie, The Actor, where it showed a clip from the first black and white movie ever. Actually, I think it was different. It was Hugo. It was Hugo that showed this. And this is a real story. The very first black and white movie that was shown was a train approaching the camera. And people in the theater scattered this train was going to hit them. They did not understand that this was a projection and not a real object. In the same way, an infant under about 18 months of age doesn't really make a lot of sense of the moving images that we see on a flat screen. They don't resolve themselves into representations of things in the real world. Now, by about 18 to 24 months of age, children do come to understand that these screen objects, these colors and flashes, are representations. They're pictures of things that might exist in real life. But that takes a while for them to develop. And so, a 6-month-old will absolutely stare at a screen. I get parents who come in, they're really proud of it. They're like, look, my child is so smart. He's looking right at the screen. He's fascinated. I'm sure that he's processing all this and making sense out of it. But that's actually not true. It's just like looking at a mobile or any other changing sort of visual stimulus. It's fascinating, but the infant is not understanding the stimulus in anything like the way that you and I are understanding it. The greater concern is that this seems to actually distract from the process of learning how the real world works and how to interact. And so we have good evidence that screen time can actually delay language development in young children, particularly under 18 months of age, and we call that combined the video deficit. Now, the other thing that happens when screens are on, and we know this really well from background TV, is that parents, while kids may or may not look up at the screens while they're on, and I hear this a lot, hey, is the TV on in your house? Yeah, but she doesn't watch it, right? It's just on in the background. It's just there for my amusement, Even if your child isn't watching the screen regularly, we know that they are looking up from what else they were doing more often than they would be. So that intense focus on moving blocks or flipping the pages of a book or rolling a car along the floor, whatever your baby or toddler is doing, is repeatedly broken up by the stimulus of looking up to see what's happening on the TV screen.
It's really an interruption rather than adding anything.
Yeah, it's interrupting. It's detracting from the concentration, but it does something much more insidious. So we know that the number of words that children hear in the first 3 years of life has a profound influence on their ability to learn language and how well and quickly they learn words themselves and learn to speak. And they learn from listening to and talking to adults. Well, what happens to these conversations when a TV is on in the background? As it turns out, the adults stop speaking. We use on average 770 fewer words every hour when there's background TV on, and that's about a 7% decrease in the total words spoken. That seems to make a difference in child language development. So when children seem to be slow to develop language in the baby and toddler years, one of our first recommendations is turn off the background television. Talk to your child, even if it's just babble, even if you're just narrating what you're doing. Look, I'm pulling the cheese out of the refrigerator, and now I'm getting bread, and now I'm going to put the cheese on the bread. Look, I made a sandwich. This is, babble to us, but it's really critical language development for children, and it's exactly the thing that we don't do if the TV is on.
Mm-hmm. I would venture to say that maybe most American parents don't have a good understanding of that, because you mentioned one of the reasons that a parent may be showing the screen to their child is that they think that it's somehow enhancing something in that young child. But are there other reasons why parents are starting with some type of screen time at such an early age?
Yeah, we know exactly. They have answered surveys for us about why they're starting so early, and they are exactly the reasons that you would consider, that you would think. They do think that it's educational, right? They're like, I'm doing a good thing for my children. They need to learn to use screen media. Well, they really don't. They'll figure that out later. There's nothing magic about using a mobile device or watching a screen. As one of my friends, or Michael Rich, actually, likes to say, the fact that your infant can swipe open an iPhone does not tell us that your infant is a genius. It tells us that Steve Jobs was a genius, right? It's like They really designed a truly brilliant system here that even an infant can figure out how to use.
Wow.
But because it's such a good... Yeah, exactly. So that's one thing. People think they need it. They'll figure it out later. Parents also give kids devices so that they can get a little peace to keep the child calm, to be able to do some chores, to, for gosh sake, be able to use the bathroom for a minute. They are amazing pacifiers, these devices. And we give them to kids for the same reason we give them toys or whatever. We just need a moment of peace. And it works really well. And, people ask, well, what about 1 minute? What about 2 minutes? 2 minutes is not going to spoil your child's development, right? If you need to use the bathroom and throw your kid a tablet, do it, okay? I mean, really, it's good. Wash your hands even. Go ahead. That's not a problem. However, don't use it for an hour.
Right.
Or 2 hours. This is a short time thing. And if you can use it with the child in your lap, any hope that you have of this being a teaching moment is really enhanced by the fact that you're doing it together. So as children get older, age 2, age 3, there are some things that they can learn from screen media, but they learn those things much more efficiently if they learn them in the company of a parent, if you're there to be the mediator and the teacher, just like you are with everything else in life.
Well, that's very interesting. And as you were talking, it came to mind are we substituting some important things like toys that need to be manipulated or playing outside for screen time? And is there any studies that show that some pretty important things are being delayed or not looked at by that child because they're substituting screen time?
When we look at how kids are spending time during their day, it's actually really interesting. It's not clear how much displacement of, for example, exercise is happening. Now, these data are really collected in older children. But surprisingly, kids who are watching TV don't seem to move that much less. And you can measure this, right? You can put an actimeter on them and see how much they move. They seem to make up some of their motion later on in the day. But there is a lot of concern that the thing that we're really displacing is that face time, that time to play with the child, to interact with the child. And I think as a parent, it's important to note that that's not always fun, right? Interacting with children is often fun. I enjoy it a lot. I do it every day. It's my life. I think it's great. But it's not always fun. Interacting with children is also teaching them limits. It's also interacting with them by taking a dangerous thing out of their hands and saying, that's dangerous. Don't touch that, right? Don't put the fork in the electrical socket. Please don't throw your food. These are also interactions that we have. And they're not necessarily fun interactions. And so it's easy for us to go like, well, if I distract the child with the screen, I'm not going to have to discipline him or her as much either. And it's going to be a lot more fun for me because I don't have to say no so often. And saying no is no fun. We don't like it. It's no fun for the kids, no fun for us. But it's really, really important for children to develop the ability to delay gratification, to understand what limits are and comply with them, to learn what's dangerous and not okay in your house. And, I love this because in our practice, we give kids crayons to play with. And the youngest ones, anybody under about age 2 to 3 will eventually turn around and try to color on the wall. And the parents are generally get upset. Oh my gosh, you can't color on the wall. Well, I don't want them coloring on the wall. They're washable crayons, right? We've done this before. But, if you imagine you're an 18-month-old and somebody gives you a crayon and they get really excited when you color on some things. You color on paper. They get really excited, right? And then you turn around and color on something else and they get really upset. How long does it take you to figure out what is okay to color on and what's going to... That's a thing you have to learn.
Right.
And you have to learn it by sheer repetition. Okay, when I color on the walls, people seem to be upset. And when I color on the paper, they clap and get really excited. What's the difference? They're both flat and white. What's the difference between these things? It's just sheer repetition. And that time that we spend with our kids is sometimes fun, sometimes it's lap time, reading time, playtime. Sometimes it's don't color on the wall. We don't color on walls. Color on this paper instead. That's not as much fun. And handing a kid a tablet is a lot more fun, but then they're missing out on an important learning experience when that's happening. They're missing out, too, on that ability to read our faces. Is Daddy happy or sad? Is Mom angry or tired? Or they need to see our face a lot to figure out what it is we want and what we're thinking about.
That is really something that I hadn't thought about before you just said that, and I think something that as educators and healthcare providers, we need to help our parents understand that FaceTime and communication in whatever format that takes priority over, screen time. So that's great.
Right.
Go ahead.
You asked about displacement, and I think another thing where we see screens really displacing healthy behavior years, is at bedtime. And about 23% of parents surveyed said that they gave their children tablets or screens at bedtime to help them calm down. And it's certainly a quiet activity in most cases. But the thing we know about the light that comes from all of these screens is that it's blue enriched. And that blue enriched light tells our brains, hey, wake up. It's morning time. That's how we know it's dawn. If you've ever taken a photography class, one of the first things they teach you is that orange or red light means evening. It's sunset, and that blue light is sunrise. And that's what comes off of our screens. So kids who use screens right up until bedtime tend not to sleep as long or as well. So when we talk about displacement, I think it's really important that parents understand that every sleep expert that I've ever talked to recommends a 60-minute lockout time for screen time before kids go to bed. That should not be the last thing they do before bedtime. That's something that you should put in there at least 1 hour before bedtime, if not earlier than that.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, definitely. That makes me rethink my own bedtime habits. So
I know, right? Now, you can get filters, light filters that take out the blue light. There have not been, as far as I know, any scientific studies to show how much that helps, but most sleep experts I've talked to say, it's better than nothing, but they also recommend pretty universally, just don't let a screen be the last thing you see before you try to go to sleep.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's really an important point. And one of the other questions I thought of while you were speaking is that there are a lot of companies out there marketing educational content via screens to families, even with young children. Are there any educational apps that are valuable to that under 18-month set? And how about over 18 months? What should we be looking for?
Right. So I think you've looked at a really important breakpoint there, because the answer is under 18 months, no. Mm-hmm. Just no. There are no, as far as I've been aware of, and I look into this pretty frequently, no evidence base to suggest that apps under 18 months do anything but teach a child how to use the app. And that's important. When we talk about education, we talk about a skill that you can usually transfer from one setting to another setting. If I teach you to count beans, you can also count pennies. And you can count people on the bus, and you can count animals in the barnyard, right? You can count one thing, you can count a lot. If you can spell anything. Whereas apps are really good at teaching kids to use the app. So if you poke and swipe and touch, kids will learn to do that. They'll learn to open the app and make it make music and noise and light up and do whatever that app does. And they'll get pretty good at it. And you think, wow, my kid's getting really smart. They know how to touch the triangle every time. But the problem is nobody's shown that child under 18 months can touch a triangle anywhere else and know that it's a triangle. They just know that the screen lights up when they touch the red triangle on the app. Now, as kids get older than 18 months, things get a little bit better, although most of the really good literature looks at above age 3. So the educational value of any screen media under age 3 is a little questionable. The best evidence that we have is that a live video interaction with another human can help children learn language as early as 24 months of age. So they took toddlers and they had a Chinese speaker on a live video chat, and those children were able to learn some novel words in Chinese using this live speaker. But that's a human who can interact in real time with the input from the child. Now, as artificial intelligence improves, I can certainly imagine a time, even a few years from now, where AI is so good that you can get an app that'll teach your child Chinese in that fashion. But right now, the technology that's out there right now does not hold that promise. I think we're going to have to get a little bit more sophisticated. And I know that stuff's in the pipeline. I don't think it's impossible. I don't think it's even that far away. But as of today, I haven't seen it. Now, looking at kids who are a little older, 3 and up, there is great evidence that goes back decades, much of it put together by Sesame Street or Sesame Workshop, looking at the ability of even just television to learn literacy, numeracy, and pro-social skills from a really well-designed TV program or app. And there are now some really good programs that are available from Nickelodeon, even from Disney, that model some of these skills, and they have moved electronically. The folks at Sesame Workshop have several apps that they have done the research for and published, demonstrating that apps, for example, like Bedtime Math, Big Bird's Word app, Martha Speaks, Cookie Monster's Challenge, can teach to some extent, but again, this is in slightly older children than 18 to 3-year-olds. There are also some apps that they've put out to help children deal with stresses in life, things like divorce or a move or a parent going to jail or a military deployment or a disaster. So there are some of these non-academic skills that are really important life skills that kids seem to be able to learn. learn from some apps.
That would be for the age 3 years and up, right?
Yeah, that's really where the best research has been done. So, under age 3, it's still questionable.
So, especially around 18 months and going a little bit forward from there, what we're really doing is, like when I was younger and went to circuses, there was always a chicken who could play the piano. And that's kind of what we're doing, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit, it's not unlike the chicken in that you can teach a toddler to tap at a screen in a certain order and get a certain response. It's just not necessarily that if you put Chopin in front of the chicken, you're going to hear anything. So that's the question right there. It's not quite ready yet. Now, people will say, well, what about a video book? What about, I have books on my tablet. What if I read those with my child? Great, you're reading together. It's not as clear that one of those books that reads themselves is teaching the same thing that you are, because, you point at the page and name things and ask questions, and you follow your child's interest. You look at his or her eyes, and he or she may also point around the room, right? If there's a dog in the book, the next thing they might turn to is your household dog and go, look, that's a dog too. And then they're like, yes, that's a dog, just like the dog in the book. The video books don't do that. But if the child is in your lap, I don't think it matters that the book is on paper or on a screen. My friend Dmitry Christakis says kids need laps, not apps.
Aww,
so
I love that.
Yeah, isn't that great? I really wish I'd made that up, but Dmitry's just a smart guy. What can I say? Laps, not apps. The lap is the important part.
So the usefulness of any media is increased by parental involvement.
Absolutely. You are still the teacher in this age group.
Wow, that's great to know. That's great to know. So thinking about change over I think you mentioned something that happened about 15 years ago and how we've changed our screen time over those years. Is it realistic in this day and age where kids who were raised on screens are now giving birth? Is it realistic to think that they're going to limit their children's access to screens?
Oh, I think it's very realistic. I mean, if you look, for example, at people who work in Silicon Valley, the people who actually, program these things and sell us these pieces of equipment, they are among the strictest people about limiting their children's access to apps and screens and devices, right? A lot of them are very rigid about screen access for their own children. And I think that, just looking at the late teenagers and early 20-somethings that I know, they have an awareness that there are two sides to this coin and that it's not all just wonderful. They also have a real eagerness to use the positive value of these tools anywhere that they can. So the question for this generation of parents is to make sure that we help them maximize the healthiest use of screen devices, because you're right, they're not just going to, move out to the woods and never plug anything into a wall. That's not these people. They're going to ask, what's the best way for me to use this? How do I use it that does the most good? Now, we need to be ready to answer those questions for them, but they're as motivated as any other generation of parents to do what's right by their kids. And I think, if you're selling wooden blocks, it's not like the wooden block people are going out of business because millennials are having babies, right?
Oh,
they're selling as many blocks and dolls and dollhouses and trains and trucks as have ever been sold in the past, right? Their play sets are still moving off the shelves. So I think this is a generation who understands how important it is to get outside and play and be face-to-face. I don't despair at all.
As a pediatrician, at what point do you start talking about this with parents? When they bring it up, or do you have a time that this is the appointment where we need to talk about screen time?
No, because we know that infants are using screens, I talk about it at almost every appointment. I always talk about sleep, and screens are a really important part of that. I talk about verbal development and gross motor development and fine motor and interpersonal development, and kids develop because they're playing with parents. So that's always an ample opportunity to discuss how to help your child develop, and that involves, using screens in the right place and limiting them from places where, they're damaging to development.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm an educator myself. I'm a childbirth educator and teach parenting classes also. How do you think that what is the timing for educators like me to start talking about this with prospective parents, ones who haven't actually had that baby yet? Is that too early to talk about it?
No, that's exactly the right time to talk about it, because when we make a plan for something, we do a much better job, right? If you just get there and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't plan for this. I got a baby, I got a phone, what am I going to do? Going to give the phone to the baby? I don't know. If you think about this ahead of time, though, and you make a plan, you think, people are making birth plans, they're making feeding plans, they're decorating the nursery. That's a great time to think, what is our plan for introducing apps? And this is something the parents need to talk to each other about, because they may have have different ideas. When do you think we should, put our child in front of a tablet? What role do you think electronics should have in our baby's life? When is the right time to introduce it and how? And no, I think that is the perfect time to talk before the baby's even born. Make a plan, and then after they're born, you can stick to it.
Are there any great websites or other educational tools out there that someone teaching a baby basics class could access to as a handout or as a link to the parent?
You bet. There is a ton of great information at Common Sense Media, csm.org. I also recommend that parents go to healthychildren.org and find, it should be very easy to find, the Family Media Use Plan tool at healthychildren.org. That is a fantastic tool that the American Academy of Pediatrics has put out to help families figure out in advance what are they going to do with media, how are they going to use it. You can make a different plan for each child. That website is at healthychildren.org/English/pages/default.aspx, or you can just look for Family Media Use Plan at healthychildren.org, and you'll be able to find all sorts of information there about media's impact on child growth, health, and development.
Okay, and I think that's especially helpful for maybe even a family practice doc or an educator, someone who's working in social services like Nurse Family Partnership. We have a lot of different listeners, so I think those are going to be great links for them to go to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We talk a lot about positive change and healthy outcomes, and in fact, we've talked about that already today. Is there any specific takeaway other than what we've talked about that comes to your mind when I mention positive change and healthy outcomes around screen time?
I think I would just reiterate what we've already talked about. There's really no need for an infant to have any screen time at all. Okay. And there are some concerns about language development. On the other hand, if you have to chuck a cell phone at your baby so that you can get 2 minutes in the bathroom, do what you have to do. It's not going to poison their brain either for a couple of minutes. I think it's important to have a proactive plan that, the parents are thinking about ahead of time about introducing media and when and how. There's really little to no reason to do it before 18 months of age. Interactive live chats at 18 to 24 months of age can be a great way to connect your child to your family. And understand, I never say don't FaceTime grandma, right? Back when we said, no screen time under age 2, this is one of the first things we got. Well, what about FaceTiming grandma? For gosh sake, FaceTime grandma. Don't not do that, okay? Your child's going to be fine. You're going to be fine. If you have a deployed family member, you're living apart from your family, for gosh sake, do that Skype chat, that video chat in whatever, FaceTime live, whatever you're going to do. Great. But in terms of, do you need media to teach your child something? Not before 2 to 3 years of life, and then really much better with your assistance than without.
Okay. Well, I think that kind of wraps up our conversation today, and I know I learned a lot, and I bet our listeners did too. I want to thank you again for agreeing to join us today, and if anybody had some specific questions, is there a way for them to get a hold of you, or shall they just listen to this podcast again?
They can find my website, drdavidhill.com. There is a submission form right there, so I look at those forms as they come in and try to address them.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Hill, for speaking with us today, and thanks for all you do for not only your own patients, but kids out there across the U.S.
Thank you so much for having me and a chance to talk with you today.
This episode of InCast is complete. Tune in regularly to hear more insightful conversations. And be sure to visit enjoyhealtheducation.com to see how Enjoy can help you inspire families and staff through our diverse childbirth and parenting teaching solutions.